Welcome to another episode of the Plant Podcast, the #1 podcast focused on emerging industrial thin client technology and manufacturing visualization. My name is Brian. The Plant is brought to you by Thin Manager Software, the global leader in thin client management and industrial mobility solutions. Thin Manager is a Rockwell Automation technology. After quite an extended pause from our monthly schedule, the Plant Podcast is back for another episode. This episode is a great one. We were joined by Nick Nepic, Senior Commercial Engineer for the Thin Manager team at Rockwell Automation. Having Nick and his expertise on the show gave us a chance to dive deep into the new container technology in the latest Thin Manager 12.1 release. Hey everyone, welcome to The Plant. We have a great show lined up today as I am joined by Nick Nepic, Senior Commercial Engineer at Rockwell Automation. Nick is part of an elite Thin Manager crew that teaches, trains, and knows the Thin Manager platform like the back of their hand. Nick, thanks so much for joining the show today. And before we jump into questions, tell us a little bit about Nick. Tell us how you came to be one of these foremost experts on Thin Manager.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Well, I just want to kind of introduce myself. So I grew up in Michigan on a farm. I always had a passion for computers. So that kind of translated to me studying computer engineering at the university, Western Michigan University. Interned at a tier 1 automotive supplier in Michigan. And that exposed me to the world of automation I didn't even know existed. I did IT desktop support there, domain computing environment, printer maintenance, and then I transitioned to controls engineering, networking. I maintained a lot of the computers on the plant floor, the PCs that we use to run production, that test things. And so that's where Thin Manager would have come in handy, and maybe we could get that later. But just really kind of a cool experience. Lots of Rockwell Automation products were used there. So ControlLogix, controllers, FactoryTalk View, Machine Edition, Panel Views, Asset Center, Strack switches. So I was working away, graduated, became an engineer there, and RE recruiter, Rockwell Automation recruiter, reached out to me via LinkedIn. And he asked, hey, would you be interested in interviewing for a tech support role in our Tech Connect group? Like, sure, why not? I wasn't too serious about the job. I said, yeah, shoot, let's go for it. So interviewed, really liked the people I interviewed with, became really interested in the job. So I moved out to Ohio and into the Mayfield Village area, it's Cleveland area. And I joined the Tech Connect group. And right when I was hired in was actually the same time that everybody in the Tech Connect group was trained on Thin Manager and how to support it. As you know, that Rockwell Automation acquired Thin Manager 3 or 4 years back. And so that was kind of our first journey into supporting Thin Manager as an organization and bringing more people on to do that. And I just loved the product from day one. It's just a great product. Really have a passion for IT. Pretty soon, in a couple months, I became really proficient with it. I helped hundreds of customers across the globe in various industries, food and beverage, water distribution, consumer products, the things that we need, pharmaceuticals that support life. Just really has been eye-opening to see how you use Thin Manager. It's really fun to kind of to see the different setups and how you push the limits on multi-monitor and all the different devices you connect to it.
Oh yeah, no. It seems like when a lot of people too, when they see Thin Manager, it's like a light goes off. They're hooked in a lot of ways, and I found it very cool to see how different customers are using it. For whether it just be visualization purposes, let alone serving up the other content that they need to control production or whatever. Some really cool stuff. Let me ask you. You said you grew up on a farm. How'd you get so into technology? Did you guys use a lot of technology on the farm?
Not really, not on the farm. But the funny part is my dad, he was kind of a visionary. He's like, the future is going to be computers. So he bought us a computer with Windows 95 on it. That was my first experience with a PC, aside from the Atari, but we won't go there because that, reveals my age. But we had the Atari, and then we had a Windows 95 PC, and it's just something that I kind of really, gravitate towards and love kind of playing with.
Yeah, I can actually one up you there, because I think the first computer in my house was the Apple II, then the Apple IIe. So I think I might have a couple of years on you there, but I totally understand. My dad was the same way. So
yeah,
well, that's cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you don't hear a lot of engineer stories that started with, I grew up on a farm. So,
it could have been the lack of technology too. Maybe I just needed to do something else than, go out and take care of a bunch of goats and kick dirt.
Does your family still have a farm?
They do. It's not as big as it used to be. I think we used to have 20 to 30 goats. And now it's just like a couple goats. It's like a handful of sheep, a horse, a donkey, some chickens. So I guess we just replaced the goats with other animals and cats and dogs and you name it.
Yeah. Probably happens. That sounds pretty normal. I always joke my dad actually had a pig farm in Oklahoma, and I didn't even know he had it until he sold it.
Oh my goodness.
And then I found out that he had inherited this farm and was renting it out, and, for years and years. And then they decided to sell the farm. And I was like, what farm? What are you talking about? Yeah.
So you never got to visit it, or did you end up going out there?
No, I never got to see it. No idea. I just know it's somewhere in Oklahoma. And of course it's not ours now. So it'd probably be kind of strange if I showed up. And,
a little bit.
So yeah, just, the farm got sold, literally sold the farm, and I was none the wiser. So,
speaking of farms, Thin Manager's used with dairy farmers. I mean, with milk producers. So I've supported a couple customers using Thin Manager there. Very unexpected for me, but
yeah, we actually have a success story on the website about a dairy industry using Thin Manager that you could. If you haven't seen it, it's a good read.
I will have to look at that.
Well, let me jump into the question. So, I'm excited to have you on the show, really to talk about one of the biggest features in 12.1. And Thin Manager 12.1, for all of our listeners, is now available for download on, you can just go to thinmanager.com. But one of, if not the biggest feature in 12.1, is the expansion of the container host and just container technology that we've put in the Thin Manager. And so the real question is, I know we're using the Docker framework, if you will, but what does a Docker host do? And can you give us kind of a brief overview of what containers are and why they're important in Thin Manager?
Yeah, I'll do my best to kind of impart what I understand of it, as I've been playing around with it for the past half year. But there's really two types of Docker hosts. You can do it on a Thin Manager terminal, where you're literally running the container host on the terminal with the Manager firmware, or you can do it on a Windows server or a Linux server. So terminal or server. And what Docker containers are, they're just isolated, lightweight, customized Linux VMs, virtual machines, that run an application. So within Manager, we have 4: Firefox, Chrome, Firefox with Citrix, and Chrome with Citrix. Okay. So our developers have put together these 4 image packages that you can download with 12.1. In fact, they come bundled with it. And you can push them out to Thin clients. And they just run locally on the Thin client, which is the best way to do it, honestly. And so if you have a web-based application or Citrix application you want access from a terminal without using remote desktop services, it's a great way to go. Doesn't require licensing, doesn't require remote desktop services CALs, the RDS CALs, or the licenses for each user or device. It's just really a neat and a very futuristic approach, I think, to serving content.
So not only are you, using I guess, less resources from the server, but you're using some of the built-in compute power of the thin client as well.
Absolutely. Yep, we're moving some of the load from the server back to the thin client, but we're removing the need to manage the OS on the thin client because that's done for you. Traditionally, the reason why we go from the client to the server is because, well, the overhead of maintaining a Windows PC is great. It takes a lot of engineering time. If it fails, it takes a long time to replace. With a container, if you lose power or if your fork truck runs over the terminal replacement isn't going to take hours. It'll take a few minutes to boot up and load the firmware and then the container, and then you're back in business.
And that's always been one of the core strengths of thin clients in general, and the power of Thin Manager is that easy terminal replacement.
Absolutely.
Now, and you can still do, because it's browser based and the container itself is browser based, you can still do the same like kiosk mode and the same things you could do using an RDP connection, but do it through the container.
Yes, you can pass parameters through the initial web page, and I think kiosk mode is one of the options. I haven't tried it, but I've tried other things such as running YouTube videos and looking at the memory usage on those.
I was going to say one of our partners, Contact, did a video not too long ago. It was the gentleman that was doing the video talked about, with Thin Manager in general, being able to do stuff like put on a Premier League soccer game, for the team to watch while working as an overlay. And I thought, man, that's interesting. I've never tried that before, but again, like we were talking about before, just seeing what some of our customers are able to do with the content delivery. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. You can run 4K monitors with Thin Manager. I'm not going to say that you get 4K quality with the videos that you run on containers. Yeah. But you can see them, you can hear the audio. It's not the main draw of them. I think the main draw is that they're lightweight. They can run sessions of web-based HMIs and MES systems, and you can do Citrix content, which was traditionally pretty hard to do with Thin Manager.
That's very cool. Well, in your opinion, I mean, just kind of what you touched on, I mean, this technology in Thin Manager, how does it expand Thin Manager's versatility in the industrial thin client market?
I think that just like I said, it's great for the web browser content. It's kind of the future of Thin Manager in my mind, because we can add more containers down the road. There's more than just Chrome and Firefox in the Docker world. These are Docker containers. So in theory, we could do anything that Docker supports or anything that, in theory, Linux supports with these containers, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. I know when we started out, like when version 12 came out, you had like a proper Docker host server, and it seems like we've already come quite a ways from that.
Yeah. And the Docker host server is, it's a cool thing that you can do that. I don't really see the value of it as much as being able to run it on the thin client, to be honest. The thin client's really the magic. And I say that just because there's complications sometimes when you're installing the Docker host on your IT managed server with group policies and things don't work, or the network blocks certain things, and it can become a mess. But when you put it on the thin client, it's all managed by us. It's on our firmware. It's in a perfect environment and sandbox, so it really can't get disturbed by a lot of those constraints you see from the security side of the IT world.
Yeah, well, and you still have the built-in security with Thin Manager and the thin client in general, so it's kind of the perfect storm. Absolutely,
yeah. It's its own sandbox, so nothing can really talk to except for the content on the web, the web app, right? And even if something did get into there, like let's say that I got infected with a virus, you reboot, the virus is gone, right? So I don't ever see that happening, but that's the beauty of, I guess, the Thin Manager technology, is that if you have to recover, it's quick. Right.
Always. Well, from the Rockwell Automation side, from the portfolio items that Rockwell has, how many of those, and I don't know if you've tested them all or anything, but you know, from both the Rockwell Automation portfolio items as well as third party, do you have an idea of how many currently can be delivered or how many you've tried?
Yeah, I don't know of any restriction on any Rockwell Automation product that can run on a PC. And even products that run on panel views can be delivered to ThinManager if you have a VNC server enabled on the panel view. So in my mind, I don't think ThinManager really has a limitation. If it could run on a PC, a Mac, a Linux machine, a server, we can probably get to it.
Right.
The real advantage is, can it be run with web-based content, or can it be run in remote desktop services? Because that's where you really start to see the savings, is when you could run multiple things on the same computer. So if you have an application that's not optimized for remote desktop services, then you have to have a one-to-one relationship. You have to have one PC per operation station. And that's kind of the old way of doing it.
Right.
The new way of doing it is, let's put multiple people on the same thin client or the same remote desktop server so we can share hardware resources and manage it centrally.
I gotcha. Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't really answer your question, but what have we tried on ThinManager and Thin Clients? Asset Center, Studio 5000, FactoryTalk View Site Edition. We have people running Machine Edition on, believe it or not, on ThinManager. You can do the ME Station software, but that is one that's limited by a one-to-one relationship. So you have to do like a one VM with Windows 10 on it per application. Can't have multiple on a remote desktop server being shared. I can't think of one that you really can't share. I think I've even heard people do RS-View32, which is, one of those older HMIs, and it works. It's a miracle, right?
Yeah, we don't hear, looking at support tickets and stuff, we definitely run into people having problems, but it almost always is kind of, not always, but there's definitely a lot of things where people run into a problem trying to serve up content. And a lot of times it comes down to an IT rule, something restricting the content as opposed to the content itself. Right.
That can definitely be a challenge. And I mean, that's one of the challenges with bridging the IT OT gap is, well, how much does IT encroach on my OT network, and how much should I integrate my OT network with my IT network? Or should I separate them?
I was going to ask you about that. And kind of how, as we introduce this container-based, application delivery, like how much more does that bridge that gap between IT and OT?
I think Citrix is the key there. I really think that there's a lot of customers, and this is what drove the development of the Citrix containers, the Firefox and the Chrome containers with Citrix embedded. There's a lot of customers in the IT world that are using Citrix to deliver their content. And historically, it's been a little bit challenging to use ThinManager to get access to that content. With containers, we now have the Citrix workspace client embedded in the container. So when you go to the web browser, you can navigate to your storefront page, and then you can click on the app you want to run, and then it opens up a Citrix session with that application. I've tried it on our network. It works great.
Right within the container.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
No, I just said right within the container.
Yeah, right within the container. If you have two networks, it even works with dual NICs. So you can have one network card on your OT network and one on your IT network, which is what I had to do to get it to work in our Rockwell environment. And it worked without any additional configuration other than adding the second network module on the terminal.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And for the listeners, Nick actually has a video on our YouTube channel. If you go to the ThinManager YouTube channel, specifically about the containers and using Citrix within the containers, that's really good and explains quite a bit and kind of gives a hands-on, like, here's how you do it, because you get to see it do it. So, let me ask you this: you talked about containers kind of being, the future. Can containers replace remote desktop service deployments?
Not really. It depends on which application you're using, honestly. So if it's FactoryTalk View Site Edition, not really, because the client runs on Windows. If you're going to use exclusively FactoryTalk Viewpoint, yeah, I guess you could run away with containers and use web-based content. But for those customers using MES systems that are web-based, I'm thinking of Ignition is all web-based or can be web-based. Those kind of HMIs that are optimized for HTML5 browsers are really great to use with containers.
Well, and I think that kind of answers my next question, because I was going to ask, when of our existing customers who are maybe using older versions of Thin Manager and thinking about upgrading, when they should consider using containers. But it sounds like just that if you have a lot of web-based HMIs or applications or Citrix or something like that, then, it would be advantageous for you to make that move.
Absolutely. And it's not to say that you can't have both. You can have a display client with your container, and you can have an RDS display client running side by side, multi-monitor with RDS on one monitor and container on the other. And we've done that. You could do virtual screens, you could do tiling. It acts just like any other display client you're used to.
That's great. Yeah. And I guess, when you set up the display clients in Thin Manager, you just choose your poison and Thin Manager will serve it up as you need.
Yes.
Well, so I think we've touched on it, but the last question I was going to ask is, what is the easiest way for customers to get started using containers in Thin Manager? But I think we kind of already focused on that a little bit as far as, get in with at least Thin Manager version 12. 12.1 obviously expands upon that container stuff. Is there, like, for people that maybe have more in-depth questions, is there a way to find out more? Or I guess your opinion on the easiest way to get started using containers in Thin Manager?
Yeah, so I guess before you get started with containers, if you want to try the containers on the terminal, I would just make a note, the hardware that you need is a little bit more. You have to have hardware that can support containers, meaning you need a thin client with at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. And it needs to be able to run firmware 9.2. Okay. So those are the bare minimum requirements. If you have that, I would say run with it. Download Thin Manager 12.1 from our downloads.thinmanager.com. And if you don't have a license, you can go to the licensing.thinmanager.com, create a free account, make a 30-day demo code, and go to town, play with it. You can download a container to it. The containers, like I said, are bundled right with the setup for 12.1. So you don't have to install anything or download anything additional to the actual 12.1 installer. It should all be there for you, ready to go. And for information, sorry to interrupt, but for information on how to do it, look at our Thin Manager 12.1 user guide. It has a really good chapter on containers or section on containers, and talks about from start to finish how to configure, deploy a container. And of course, the video that you mentioned too is a kind of an overview of how they work too.
Yeah, we just so everybody knows, we have a couple of different videos on the YouTube channel that explain a little bit deeper, and like Nick mentioned, the user guide is a great resource in the manual section of Thin Manager, along with we've got plenty of other stuff and resources that you can find on how to do this stuff. And you can always ask a question through the help desk as well. Is very, very easy way to get more information on stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's really all the questions I had for you. And, just a simple thank you for coming on and talking to us about this. I know everybody's really excited about the container technology, and it's really been a focus for a little while, and I think it'll continue to grow. I just installed 12.1 myself the other day, and just what you were talking about, you can see the container modules in there and what's available for you. So I'm pretty excited to get started on it, because I haven't had much of a chance to play with it myself. So that's exciting for me. And other than that, thanks for coming on and joining us and talking with us a little bit.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Brian.
Very cool. Well, if any of our listeners have a question for Nick, you can actually find his contact information on the Contact Us page of thinmanager.com. If you like this episode, please click the subscribe button and subscribe to The Plant for a monthly discussion on emerging automation technologies. For more information on Thin Manager, please visit thinmanager.com from any of your devices. I'm your host, Brian Harned, and we hope you can join us next time on The Plant.